Hey guys, Gunnar Thompson here with Oat Specialties, and today we're going to be talking about warm-ups. Now, before I get started here, I do want to introduce our social media manager, Alex, who came up with this idea for the video, and he's came up with a few more that we'll get to. But for right now, Alex, can you tell me a little bit about why you wanted me to cover this topic?
Right. So I just think that it's an aspect of the game that a lot of people overlook. As a travel coach and a showcase coach, there's plenty of time in between games, or plenty of times that I've seen coaches just throw their kids on the field. They'll throw for 5-10 minutes, and then first pitch is thrown. So a lot of kids, they throw to warm up, which is what you're not supposed to do. And so it's just one of those things I think is important for kids to harp on and to learn how to properly do.
Outstanding. And I really, really do think that, first and foremost, I would just want to tell you that this is based on my own preference. So this is not instructional in any way, shape, or form. I highly suggest that you go get yourself assessed by a facility, by a therapist, by a trainer, somebody. Get your individual needs met, and don't just take this for the word. This is really to open up a discussion about how we look at warm-ups and how holistic that we need to be with our warm-ups. So let's get right into it. First and foremost is age. So the younger you are, of course, you're going to be a little bit more limber. You're going to have less muscle mass. So you're going to be able to get in a little bit better positions a little bit easier, a little bit sooner. So if you're younger, you may need a little less time to warm up. But that doesn't mean that you don't need any time to warm up. Alex brought up a great point. You got the select ball teams that show up 5 minutes and they make a few throws and they're ready to go. Let's not get that crazy as far as limiting the time for younger. I think that they realistically should have at least 15 to 20 minutes to warm up their body, and then at least another 10 to 15 minutes or whatever to warm up their arm. So next is position. Okay, we need to know, is it a catcher? Is it a pitcher? Is it a first base, third base? You name it. The positions really, really matter because we know what kind of throws they're going to be making. We know what kind of movements they're going to be making, and we know how to prepare them a little bit better for those. And also frequency. If it's a first base or third base who may be making a throw every once in a while, we can have a little bit more thorough of a warm-up, and we may even have a little bit of a warm-up in between innings to keep them loose as well. This one's a big one to me, okay? It's kind of a hot topic. It's something that's been talked about a lot, and now it's being accepted maybe too far in the other way of the extreme. Fitness level, okay? We talk about running poles, okay? We're not advocates of running poles because it slows you down and it's a wear and tear on the body, okay? Wear and tear on the joints. However, you do need a base level of aerobic capacity. If you are out of breath on your warm-ups, there's a really great chance that you are not up to par on your aerobic, okay? And one of the things that I learned from Alex Simone with Simone Baseball Performance, I don't know if he came up with it, but he has really harped on it the last few years, and I got to give credit where credit's due there. He actually started incorporating some aerobic warm-ups. So basically what you would do is you would take the exercises and just continuously roll through them so that you're still getting your mobility, your flexibility, you're getting your activation, you're getting some of this stuff, but you're moving at a point where it elevates the heart rate, and now you're working on your aerobic capacity, which is really, really important when you're talking about recovering, whether it be from pitch to pitch or outing to outing or even week to week. It's still important. Yes, we want to be explosive. We want to be dynamic and we want to be powerful, but we need to be able to recover as well. So aerobic, your fitness level really is important here. So the other thing that I want to talk about, and this goes to the next one, is time available. So if we're going to work on that fitness level, maybe we have a little bit longer of a warm-up during practices. You have that availability. You don't have to worry about being at optimal performance at practice. So go ahead, take your time with warm-ups at practice. When it's game time, you want the minimal effective dose. You want to get loose, get hot, get ready, but you don't want to fatigue yourself. So, use the practice time to be able to really go through thorough warm-ups, and then whenever it comes game time, now you're ready to just get loose, get hot, and you're in great shape anyways. Equipment availability, there's a big one. Okay, some Sometimes you'll have no equipment. Okay, you need to be able to adjust to that. The way that I always kind of did it myself in my head was I had a sheet, and I would write down like all the things that I thought I would have available to me and all the things that I didn't know if I'd have available to me. And the ones that I did know, the ones that I brought in my bag, then I would write those down. Now, if I didn't know if they were going to be available for me, like for instance, let's say that at home or whatever, there was a bench that was tall enough for me to foam roll on and not have to get on the ground. Okay, but if we go on the road, maybe the bench is taken or something like that. So I'm going to have to do it on the ground. That's fine. You know, I have a plan for that. That's what I'm saying. Have a plan for what equipment is available and what's not. The other thing is to consider is some items that you wouldn't normally think about for warm-ups being utilized in warm-ups. Thomas St. Clair did a presentation for us with our online virtual training forum that we did in conjunction with the ABCA booth this year. And with his presentation, he talked about how he used the water buoys and the water balls in his warm-ups to prepare his guys. And that was like a light bulb going off in my head. I'd never thought about that, but it's so impactful. He utilizes what he had available to him and something that has, which we'll talk about later, it actually has a positive effect on it. So, next is going to be full body and arm focus. I love splitting these up because I feel like athletes really need to get their whole body loose. We need to raise that core temperature. We need to get the ligaments and tendons loosened up a little bit before we really get into the arm focus. So many times, kind of like what Alex was talking about, some kids don't even get their full body loose. They just worry about, I'm going to get a few weighted ball throws or something like that. I'm going to warm up my arm. You know, maybe I'll even do a shoulder too, but that's great. But what about their full body? What about their back? You know how many pitchers, catchers, first basemen, third basemen, you name it, baseball players in general complain about back injuries? I was there. It was a lot. So take care of your whole body, and then let's take care of the arm. All right. So that is the considerations. That's the things that you really need to think about before you even start to write down your warm-up. Okay? Now let's get into the programming. Programming is where you're actually kind of writing down the things that you're going to do and in what kind of order. So this is based off of my personal preference. This is what, if I was going to go out and pitch a game, this is what I would do. This may not be what you do, and that's okay. But let's just have a discussion about what I would do, and then you can go with your trainer, your coach, or if you are the coach, you can talk with your player about this and figure out what's right for them. But let's just talk about me, for instance. Soft tissue. Why would I do foam rolling? Why would I do a lacrosse rolling? Why would I do maybe the relief stick, something like that? Because it feels good. I know that there's been some science that has came out and said maybe it's not as good as what we thought. And that's okay. I love reading the scientific journals. I love reading all of the clinical trials and stuff like that. I take that all into consideration, but at the end of the day, it's how it feels to the player. And for me personally, I love foam rolling. I love using the lacrosse ball. I love using the relief stick. I love those things because it makes my body feel good. And anything that does that, I'm on board with. Next is activation and mobility. You'll notice right here it says individualize. I think this is kind of the big bang for your buck by going and getting assessed first with your physical therapist, trainer, or facility. Because this is so individualized based on your needs. For some people, they may not have the thoracic or the middle back range of motion or mobility. Maybe you're really tight in the hips. Maybe you're tight in the ankles. Or maybe you can go dominate a game of Twister. So, next, let's get into the central nervous system. So, you gotta excite the central nervous system. We gotta get it fired up. And something that we did at the Texas Baseball Ranch, and something that I just don't see being implemented in a lot of warm-ups, is doing something really, really fast for a short period of time just to get the athletes ready. I mean, on a moment's dime, they can turn. Okay? That's what it means by exciting the central nervous system. Soft tissue, you can do slow. Activation, mobility, you can do slow. Arm care, you can even do the slow with arm care. Even when you get into throwing, you've seen it. This whole routine, it's slow. We need to speed up. We need to be powerful, be explosive. And in order to do that, we need to excite the central nervous system. Right beside here, we talk about removing muscle slack. This is what I was talking about with the water boys and the water balls in Thomas St. Clair's presentation. It removes the muscle slack and gets us ready. It makes us able to produce force faster because we're removing the muscle slack. We're also able to co-contract and be able to stabilize certain joints during your range of motion. So it's able to produce more power, okay? That's what this whole thing is about, exciting the central nervous system and removing muscle slack. Next, arm care. You got your weighted balls, which for me, I loved using weighted balls before I threw. I loved them. I loved the way they feel. Now, I didn't go 100% with them. I wasn't max effort or anything like that, but I personally love to do it. I loved using tubing. Tubing was kind of my deal. I really liked it. The shoulder tube. The shoulder tube is a great warm-up, great arm care tool, and again, something that, I did quite often. The wrist weights. I loved using the wrist weights. People joked with me all the time. I actually had the wrist weights in pretty much every classroom that I went in through the day. So next we get into throwing specific. This is where we get into more of like the sock. If we had the sock whenever I was playing, I would have used the sock before throwing every single time. It's a great bridge between doing nothing and actually throwing because it's less stressful. You can slowly ramp up in a sock and you don't have to worry about, throwing it over your partner's head and then waiting 5 minutes to make your next throw. So I love that. Then you can get into more of like the connection ball or the connector club work, something where you're still throwing, but you're also alleviating some of the stress because you're able to get your body in a more advantageous, efficient pattern. So those kind of things could be used next, and that's what I would use. And then I would throw. And the only thing that I'll say this on the throwing aspect, because everybody loves to throw different. Some people love long tossing, some people hate long tossing. That's okay. For me, I loved long tossing, but the one thing that I absolutely had to do was move my lower half when I threw. I loved, the gathering or the step behinds or something just to get my body moving while I threw so that it didn't get tightened up. And, it stayed loose, it stayed ready. That was a big key for me. Lastly, this is a big one, something I got from Garrett Wolfworth down at the Texas Baseball Ranch. Let your athletes invest in their warm-up. If you let them help you, or if you're the athlete, if you do it with your coach, if you invest in the warm-up, you're going to get more out of it. Think about it. If the coach sits there and says, you're going to do this, 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 and this, and I tell the coach, I don't really like this, and I certainly don't like this, so whenever you look away, I'm going to do something different. Okay? It'll make them hold themselves more accountable if they're invested in it. So I strongly, strongly encourage that you talk it over with your athletes, okay? Take all of this into consideration, and if you're a coach or if you're a facility owner or if you're a parent, talk this over with your kids, with your athletes, and then come up with a plan together. Okay, that's what I strongly, strongly encourage. Now, Alex, is there any questions that you have pertaining to the warm-up in general?
Right. So I guess just what are some suggestions that you would have for players who say they have a coach that doesn't allow time for individualized training, or they don't allow them to kind of do their own thing to get ready?
It's a great question. So I think I break it down into two segments there. One is how the athlete approaches the coach that may not have this at the forefront of their head, so their thoughts. And then two is the fact that the coaches think that individualized is going to take too much time. So let's talk about the first thing, which is the athlete's approach. first and foremost, I learned this from Ron Wolforth way back in the day, and it's nice because I heard him talk about it recently, so he hasn't really changed his opinion on this. Away from the field is when you want to talk to the coach about how things are going, okay? And do it in a very, well-toned manner. Don't approach him and say, Coach, I really don't like that. Don't do that, okay? Just maybe schedule a time with him, come in his office and be like, Coach, look, I just feel like I'm not getting loose enough. I'm not getting warmed up. Like, is there anything that we can do to allow me a little extra time? Or, maybe while everybody's doing in and outs, or, maybe while y'all are doing the coin flip or something like that, can I get some extra time to warm up? Okay? A lot of times coaches are not going to have a problem with a kid doing extra. Okay? It's usually whenever the kid is trying to get out of something that the coach really, really cares about. Okay? So as an athlete, if your coach is not giving you the proper amount of time, or they're making you do in and outs, they're making you, put your helmet on and everything for the coin flip, stuff like that, just go to them. Like I said, schedule a time that's away from the field. I feel like sometimes the coaches are a little bit guarded as soon as they get to the field because they got parents coming after them. The umpires sometimes, aren't necessarily G-hauling with them, so they're guarded. So take that away, and you'll have a much better relationship that way. And of course, always be cordial. That's the big thing. Like, understand that they have a lot of kids that they're having to worry about, and understand that certain, your optimal time may just not fit with that team. Now, the second part of that is the coach's responsibility. And the coach, that thinks that individualized warm-ups and that sort of thing take too much time, they really don't. That's why when we talked about time availability, okay, for practices, you need to practice your warm-up. That's one big thing that I saw whenever I played. I don't know about you, Alex, but a lot of the players would go through more thorough warm-ups for a game than they would for practice. Practice, they're like, oh yeah, I'm good to go. Okay, not the case. You need to practice your warm-ups during practice. So if I'm a coach, then I would, if I'm knowledgeable about it, then I would assess my athletes and figure out what their weaknesses, what their constraints are, what their mobility issues are. If I'm not, I would refer my athletes to go to a trainer or go to a physical therapist who could do the assessment, so that when they come back to me, they can tell me, hey, coach, my hips are really tight. Okay, we can come up with some exercises for that. Hey, coach, my thoracic's tight. Okay? Or, coach, I'm great. They just told me that I lack a little bit of stability. Great. Well, now we can throw you with a water boy, or a water ball. And so if you do that ahead of time and make a plan and practice it, then when it comes time for the game, an athlete can get through their warm-ups relatively quickly. Okay? And then probably another really, really big takeaway that I took from the Texas Baseball Ranch is make sure that you have your ideal warm-ups, and then at least have an emergency warm-up. Have something where you got to get hot and hurry. 5 minutes or less kind of thing. If you only had 5 minutes, pick the 2 or 3 things that you absolutely need to get ready to throw. So have that in your back pocket in case you show up late to a game, or in case you had engine failures or something like that. Something that prevented you from getting there in an ideal timely manner. So, what else you got?
All right, so how do you know when you're at that line between, say, a warm-up and a workout, or you're getting kind of, past your prime performance level? So I guess what are some cues or things to look for while you're warming up to know whether you need to add more or take a little bit off your warm-up?
That's a great question. So I think it goes back a little bit to fitness level. During practice, I'm really, for me personally, I was always okay with being a little bit out of breath. I would kind of go through, I would probably go through my warm-ups faster at practice, because most of the time I was either coming from class or something like that. I was in a hurry. And again, for practices, we feel like, we only need 10 or 15 minutes of warm-up, but for a game, we need half an hour. Like, it just didn't make sense to me. But if an athlete is out of breath, if they can talk, with one another, with other athletes or whatever, then I think the warm-up is good for a game. So in a game setting, I would talk to the athletes and make sure that they could talk back without being out of breath. That would give me a good cue that I'm not fatiguing them, because they're still able to control their breathing and everything else. Now, in a practice setting, again, that goes back to, if you want to do some aerobic warm-ups, maybe they should be out of breath a little bit in their warm-ups during practice. But for a game, you talk about it, optimal, we want that minimal effective dose. Just talk to them. If they stay within breath, then the good chances that they won't be fatiguing themselves. All right. Anything else?
That's all I got.
All right. Well, thanks guys for tuning in. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and make sure you ring that bell so that you'll know when all the videos are released. We're going to be coming back with some more. Stay tuned.